The village of Duro was built around the rhythm of wind and whispers, where every dawn carried the scent of soil and the songs of ancestors. On the edge of this village stood the iron gate, tall, ancient, and dark as the heart of the earth itself. It was said that no hand of greed, anger, or deceit could open it. Only the pure-hearted could pass through, and those who tried with malice were said to vanish into silence. To the people, the gate was more than metal. It was a guardian, a sacred boundary between the seen and unseen. And to Nalia it was home. Nalia was a young woman of quiet grace, her presence like cool rain after a long drought. She lived in a modest hut near the gate, the same home her late parents had built when they were chosen as its caretakers. Every morning, as the first rays of sun spilled across the golden fields, she would rise before the roosters and walk barefoot to the gate with a clay pot of water balanced on her head. Her hands, calloused from work yet gentle as the wind, would wash the dust from the iron surface, her reflection shimmering faintly on its dark sheen. As she cleaned, she whispered a soft prayer, not for herself but for her village. "Let this gate never open to evil," she would murmur. "Let it stand strong for truth." The villagers often paused to watch her. Some admired her devotion, others simply took comfort in her kindness. Children ran to her for stories and honeyed bread, and elders came to her when their bones ached or their spirits faltered. She always found time, even when her own hands trembled from exhaustion. It was said that her heart was woven with patience, and her eyes carried the calm of the river after rain. Despite her humble life, Nalia possessed a rare beauty, not of jewels or silks but of spirit. Her skin glowed like bronze under the sun, and her laughter carried warmth that could soothe the bitterest soul. Yet she never saw herself as special. She often said, "The gate doesn't open because it's iron. It opens because it listens. And we must listen too." The iron gate itself was unlike anything built by human hands. Its carvings told stories of old warriors, spirits, rivers that turned to serpents, and moons that wept silver tears. No blacksmith in living memory could explain how it came to be. It was said that it was forged when the first light met the first shadow, sealed with a vow that the world would always balance between both. For generations it had remained closed except for one day each decade, the day of blessings, when the elders prayed, and the gate creaked open for a single heartbeat before shutting again. That breath of wind from beyond was believed to renew the village's fortune for another 10 years. As that day approached again, excitement swept through Duro. Merchants decorated their stalls, children painted stones with sacred symbols, and drums echoed from every corner. But Nalia felt something different stirring, not excitement, but a quiet pull in her heart, as if the gate itself was calling her name. Sometimes, while she swept the fallen leaves, she would feel a soft hum beneath her fingers, as though the iron was alive, breathing, waiting. At night, she dreamed of standing before it, her palms pressed to the cold metal as it pulsed like a heartbeat. A voice, distant and gentle, would whisper her name, "Nalia," before fading into the wind. Each time she awoke, she found her cheeks wet with tears and the sound of the gate's chains echoing in her ears. Her closest friend, an old woman named Tiri, noticed her unease. "The gate speaks to those it remembers," Tiri told her one afternoon as they sat beneath the shade of a baobab tree. "It remembers your mother's songs and your father's hands. Maybe now it remembers you." Nalia smiled faintly but said nothing. She continued her duties, gathering herbs for the sick, helping the farmers with their harvest, and teaching children to weave baskets. Yet the feeling persisted. The iron gate had become more than a task, it was a mirror to her soul, reflecting everything she didn't say aloud. Her life was simple, yes, but it was filled with purpose. She didn't crave wealth or admiration, only peace, and the gate, for reasons she could not explain, made her feel whole. As the day of blessings drew closer, the air grew heavy with expectation. The chief ordered the path to the gate cleared and the sacred drums to be prepared. Every villager planned to gather when the sun stood at its highest. Nalia, as the caretaker, would lead the cleansing ritual at dawn. On the eve of the ceremony, as the sky burned orange and purple, she stood before the gate alone. Fireflies flickered like stars around her. She reached out and touched the cold metal, her fingertips tingling with warmth. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "you will open again. I hope I'm worthy to stand before you." The wind stirred softly, carrying with it the faint sound of a sigh, deep, ancient, and knowing. For the first time, Nalia thought she saw the carvings shift slightly, as if the faces on the gate were watching her in return. She stepped back, her heart racing but not from fear. It felt like recognition. She couldn't explain why, but she sensed that something was about to change, not just for the gate or the village but for her entire life. And as the last light of dusk faded, A streak of silver moonlight touched the iron gate. It shimmered faintly, like a giant heart awakening from slumber, and Nalia felt its warmth spread through the earth beneath her feet. The whispers of destiny had begun, and the girl of the iron gate was about to learn that some hearts are not chosen by the world, they are chosen by the unseen. Zara had come into Nalia's life like a shadow across a bright morning. After Nalia's father passed away, the villagers had whispered their sympathies, but no one had warned her what loneliness could invite. Within a season her father's widow, Zara, arrived with her own daughter, Tari, a girl with sharp eyes and a voice that could slice kindness in two. At first, Nalia welcomed them both with open arms, believing that family, no matter how broken, was still a blessing. But soon the sweetness turned bitter. Zara was a woman of cold beauty and sharper pride. She admired her reflection more than she admired her own deeds, and she saw in Nalia a constant reminder of all she would never be, pure, loved, and respected. Where Nalia's presence brought warmth to those around her, Zara's presence chilled the air. And the more the villagers smiled at Nalia, the more Zara's envy grew, twisting in her chest like vines choking a tree. At first the cruelty came quietly. Zara would give Nalia the heaviest chores and the smallest portions at dinner. She would watch as Nalia scrubbed the floors late into the night, pretending not to notice her bruised hands or trembling shoulders. "The gatekeeper's daughter must know humility," she'd say with a cold smile. Nalia, too kind to protest, simply nodded and continued her work, her silence mistaken for weakness. But as the years passed, Zara's envy fermented into hatred. It gnawed at her until she began to imagine dark reasons for Nalia's grace. One evening, as the women of the village gathered around the fire, Zara began to weave her poison with words dipped in honey. "Have you ever wondered," she said softly, eyes glinting in the firelight, "why the iron gate hums when she's near? Why it opens only when she touches it? Perhaps it's not devotion that moves it, but something else." The others looked at her curiously, uneasy but intrigued. Zara continued, lowering her voice to a whisper. "They say her mother was not entirely of this world. Some say she carried the blood of those who once forged the gate. Maybe that's why Nalia cleans it every morning, not to honor it but to feed it." Gasps spread like sparks. Zara leaned back, pretending regret. "I speak only what I've seen," she murmured, her lips curling faintly. "The gate moves when she sings. Tell me what mortal voice makes iron sigh." By the next sunrise the rumor had taken root. It crept through the market, the riverbanks, the fields, spreading faster than fire through dry grass. Where once villagers greeted Nalia with smiles, now they watched her with wary eyes. Mothers pulled their children close. Men muttered prayers when she passed. Even those who had known her since childhood began to question what they saw. Tari, Zara's daughter, found joy in the shifting tide. Jealous of Nalia's quiet beauty and the admiration she received, she became her mother's eager accomplice. "The cursed one walks again," Tari would mock loudly whenever Nalia crossed the square. "Careful, the gate might follow you home." Laughter followed, cruel and cutting. Nalia bore it all in silence, her heart aching not for herself but for the villagers who once trusted her. One day, as Nalia approached the gate with her usual clay pot of water, she noticed a group of women whispering nearby. When she smiled at them they turned away. Her hands trembled slightly, but she continued her task, washing the iron surface with care. Behind her, Tari's laughter rang out. "She's feeding her spirit friend again," the girl taunted. Others laughed nervously, unsure whether to join or flee. Zara watched from afar, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. Every whisper, every side glance, every cruel joke tightened the noose of isolation around Nalia's heart. Yet, the more they tried to break her spirit, the gentler she became, as though she drew strength from the same gate they feared. That night, Zara stood by her window, watching Nalia kneel beside the iron gate under the moonlight. The girl's voice rose in soft prayer, pure and steady, while the wind danced around her. For a moment, Zara felt something cold grip her heart, fear perhaps or guilt, but she crushed it quickly. "If she shines brighter than me," she muttered to herself, "then I'll make sure her light is blamed for the fire." And so, the seeds of cruelty were sown, watered by jealousy, fed by lies, and rooted in the fear of a woman who could not bear to see another's goodness outshine her own. What Zara didn't know was that the iron gate had listened to every word, every whisper, every cruel laugh. And though it remained silent, its silence was not emptiness, it was the deep breath before justice awakens. The morning the offering vanished, the village awoke under a heavy silence. The sacred drum had not sounded at dawn, and the temple's keeper, trembling and pale, announced that the golden bowl of moon grain, a gift meant to honor the ancestors, was gone. Panic rippled through the village like a storm over still water. The elders gathered quickly, their voices sharp with disbelief and anger. For generations the offering had never been touched, for it was believed that whoever defiled it would bring ruin upon their bloodline. Zara stood among the crowd, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders, her eyes glimmering with false sorrow. "How could such a thing happen?" she cried dramatically. "Who would dare steal from the ancestors themselves?" Her words carried easily, and the villagers murmured in agreement. Fear was a fertile soil for suspicion, and Zara knew just how to plant her seeds. Tari, standing at her mother's side, leaned forward. "Mother, didn't Nali attend the temple last night? I saw her walking near it when the moon was high." The murmurs turned sharper. Heads turned. Nalia, who had come quietly to help with the morning's chores, froze as dozens of eyes locked onto her. "I only went to light the incense," she said softly. "The flame had died and I wished to honor." But Zara cut her off, her voice rising with a tremor of false outrage. "Honor? You speak of honor when the ancestors' gift is gone? You alone were near the temple, Nalia. What shall we think?" The people shifted uneasily. Nalia's voice, though calm, seemed small against the wave of suspicion. A woman whispered, "The gate opens for her. Perhaps it opens doors that should stay closed." Another added, "If the rumors were true, maybe she used her magic to hide the offering." Zara's heart raced with dark triumph as she watched the doubt spread. Every word spoken against Nalia was a thread tightening the trap she had set. The elders, grim-faced and uncertain, finally raised their staffs. "Bring the accused to the gate of shame," declared the oldest among them, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Let the truth be revealed before the ancestors themselves." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The gate of shame was not merely a place of punishment, it was a mark that could never be erased. To be tied to it meant being stripped of dignity, accused of offending the spirits and cast out in disgrace. Only the gate itself could determine innocence. If it opened, the accused was forgiven. If not, the guilt was sealed forever. Nalia's knees weakened, but she did not cry out. "Elders," she said, her voice trembling yet firm, "I have stolen nothing. I would never betray the ancestors." But her words fell on hearts already hardened by fear. The villagers looked away as Zara stepped forward, pretending grief. "Child, you've brought sorrow upon us all," she said softly, her tone dripping with false pity. "May the gate show mercy." Before the sun reached its peak, the ritual began. Nalia was led through the village, her wrists bound with coarse rope, the people following in solemn silence. Children peeked from doorways, their eyes wide with confusion. Some villagers averted their gaze entirely, unwilling to watch a girl they once praised now treated as a criminal. When they reached the great iron gate, the same gate Nalia had tended with love all her life, the air grew still. The wind that usually whispered through the metal bars was silent, as if holding its breath. The elders tied her to the cold iron, her arms spread against its ancient surface. Zara watched from the crowd, her lips curled in satisfaction. The eldest of the council lifted his staff. "Nalia of the border village," he proclaimed, "you are accused of desecrating the sacred offering. You shall remain bound to the gate of shame until the spirits give their judgment." The ropes tightened. Nalia's skin burned against the iron, but her gaze did not waver. "If I have sinned," she whispered, "let the ancestors turn from me. But if I speak the truth, let the gate know my heart." The villagers turned away, some crying softly, others whispering prayers. As the sun sank lower, shadows stretched across the ground, and the gate of shame gleamed faintly in the fading light. Zara lingered for a moment longer, staring at Nalia's calm, tear-streaked face. For the first time, something inside her twisted uneasily, a flicker of fear, perhaps, that the very gate she used to destroy the girl might remember who truly spoke lies. But she brushed the thought away and walked back toward the village, leaving Nalia bound beneath the setting sun, unaware that the gate she meant as punishment was listening, and that its silence was not judgment but promise. The moon rose pale and cold, casting its silver glow upon the village border where the iron gate stood tall and unmoving. The world seemed to hold its breath as Nalia was led forward by torchlight, her wrists bound with rough rope that bit into her skin. Every step she took echoed softly against the earth, mingling with the whisper of the wind and the uneasy murmurs of those who had come to witness her shame. The elders stood in a half-circle before the gate, their faces shadowed beneath their hoods. The torches flickered in their trembling hands, their flames bending backward as though resisting the ceremony. Behind them, the villagers gathered, their eyes glinting with sorrow, fear, or curiosity. Even those who had once smiled at Nalia now dared not meet her gaze. The night had become an executioner's silence. Zara stood slightly apart, her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders. Her expression was carefully schooled, a picture of somber concern, but her heart pulsed with cruel satisfaction. Tari stood beside her, uneasy, yet unwilling to disobey her mother. "She'll be fine," Zara whispered, her tone sharp. "If her heart is pure, the gate will open. But if not?" She let the sentence drift into the wind and Tari shivered. Nalia was placed before the iron gate, the same gate she had polished, guarded, and prayed before for years. It loomed above her now, ancient and vast, forged from metal said to have been blessed by the sky gods themselves. Its engravings shimmered faintly under the moonlight, spirals, runes, and faces of forgotten ancestors. But tonight the gate was cold and silent. The eldest of the council raised his staff, his voice weary and solemn. "Nalia, daughter of the late Kiro, guardian of the border gate, you stand accused of desecrating the sacred offering. Do you confess your guilt?" Nalia lifted her chin, her eyes glistening. "I have done no wrong," she said softly. Her voice trembled but did not break. "My hands are clean, my heart is true. Let the gate see my truth." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The elder nodded gravely. "Then let the gate decide." At his signal, 2 guards stepped forward. They turned Nalia toward the cold iron and began to bind her wrists tightly to the bars. The rope scraped her skin raw as it tightened. Her breath came shallow, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. Yet even as she felt her tears fall, she whispered prayers under her breath, not for herself, but for the hearts that had turned against her. The wind began to stir. It whistled through the nearby fields and brushed past the torches, making their flames flicker violently. The villagers drew back in fear, for the wind sounded like a voice, low, mournful, ancient. The elder's staff struck the ground 3 times. "The spirits will speak through the gate before sunrise," he declared. "If it opens, she shall be free. If it remains closed, her guilt shall be sealed." One by one the villagers left, their faces hidden behind shame and dread. Soon only Nalia remained, bound to the gate beneath the moonlight. The torches burned low, casting long shadows over her frail form. The ropes dug deeper into her wrists until tiny drops of blood appeared, glimmering like dark jewels. She lifted her head toward the stars, whispering into the wind. "Ancestors, if my heart has been just, let your truth be known. If I am to suffer, let it be for the sake of peace." Her voice was soft but carried far, caught in the restless air. The night deepened. The forest sighed. The gate stood motionless, its iron cold against her skin. Yet, beneath her feet, the earth seemed to hum, faintly like a heartbeat waiting to awaken. Her tears fell quietly, soaking into the dust. The wind brushed them away, carrying them across the plains. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled though no storm cloud hung in the sky. It was as if the world mourned with her, as if the heavens themselves wept for the innocent girl tied unjustly beneath their gaze. And so Nalia remained through the night, bound to the gate of shame. The moon watched her in silence. The wind howled her sorrow. The gate did not open, not yet, but deep within its iron heart, something ancient stirred as though it had begun to remember her kindness. Days melted into one another beneath the unyielding weight of the sun. Nalia remained bound to the gate of shame, her body weakened, her lips dry and cracked, yet her spirit refused to yield. The villagers came each morning to see if the gate had opened, whispering to one another in hushed tones. Some pitied her, others feared her, and a few, led by Zara, mocked her still, claiming the gods had turned away. But Nalia did not beg. She did not curse the ones who tied her there or plead for her life. Instead, she prayed, not to be freed, but for the hearts of her people to remember kindness. Each dawn, as the sun painted the sky in faint gold, her soft voice rose like a fragile song carried on the wind. "Forgive them," she whispered, "for they know not the truth that binds me here." The wind listened. The fields beyond the village swayed gently as though answering her prayer. Even the birds that once avoided the gate began to perch near it, their songs low and mournful. The iron bars, cold and ancient, began to hum faintly at night, a deep, almost imperceptible sound, like a sigh from something long asleep. Zara grew uneasy. From her window she could see the gate each evening, outlined against the fading light. The torches the villagers had left there flickered strangely, their flames bending toward Nalia as if drawn by her presence. "She cannot still be alive," Zara muttered. But each morning when the villagers returned, they found her still there, her eyes weary but her face calm, illuminated by a strange peace. Tari could no longer bear it. On the third day she crept to the gate before sunrise, carrying a small bowl of water. Nalia lifted her head weakly when she heard soft footsteps. "Why do you come?" she asked. Tari's hands trembled. "To bring you water." "I didn't think it would go this far." She glanced back toward the village. "Mother says you brought this upon yourself." Nalia smiled faintly, her voice barely more than breath. "No one brings pain upon themselves, child. It is the fear of others that builds cages for the innocent." She nodded toward the bowl. "Thank you, but give it to the earth. The ground is thirstier than I." Tari hesitated, tears stinging her eyes. She knelt and poured the water at Nalia's feet. The moment it touched the soil, a soft breeze stirred, circling the gate in a slow, deliberate motion. The iron hinges groaned faintly, just once, as if stretching after a long slumber. Tari gasped and looked up, but Nalia's expression was serene. "The gate listens," Nalia said softly. "It hears truth when the world turns deaf." Word of the faint creak spread through the village like wildfire. Some said it was an omen, others called it a trick of the wind. The elders ordered that no one approach the gate again, fearful of the spirit that might dwell there. Yet each morning the villagers awoke to the sound of the wind brushing against iron, gentle, rhythmic, like breathing. By the fifth day even the ground around the gate had begun to change. Where Nalia's tears had fallen, tiny green shoots began to emerge, defying the heat and dust. The sight silenced those who once cursed her name. Children, curious and unafraid, left small offerings of flowers near the roots. Their parents, torn between faith and fear, pretended not to see. Still Nalia prayed. She prayed for her stepmother's peace, for Tari's heart, for the strength of the elders who had condemned her. "Let their spirits find truth," she whispered. "Let no bitterness take root in them as it once did in me." That night, as the stars wheeled silently above, the wind rose again, slow, deliberate, heavy with power. The iron gate groaned deeply this time, a sound that rippled through the village and stirred every soul from sleep. It did not open, but it no longer stood in silence. Those who listened closely swore they could hear a faint heartbeat within the metal, echoing softly in time with Nalia's breath, a rhythm of forgiveness pulsing through iron and air alike. The storm began as a whisper, a low rumble that rolled across the horizon like a distant warning. The villagers, accustomed to dry winds and gentle rains, looked up uneasily as dark clouds gathered above the hills. The air thickened, heavy with tension, and the sacred gate, still standing over Nalia's frail figure, seemed to hum with anticipation. By nightfall the sky cracked open. Lightning tore through the heavens, illuminating the iron bars with flashes of white fire. The wind roared, bending trees and scattering rooftops, as if the gods themselves had awakened in fury. Villagers rushed to their homes, shuttering windows, muttering prayers, but no one dared to go near the gate. It stood alone in the storm, the rain lashing against its frame like 1,000 weeping voices. Nalia, still bound to the iron, lifted her head weakly. The rain soaked her clothes, her hair clinging to her face, yet her eyes glowed with calm defiance. "If this is my end," she whispered through the wind, "let it be in truth, not in shame." Her words vanished into the roaring night, but the gate seemed to listen, the iron vibrating faintly beneath the lightning's glare. A blinding flash split the sky, striking a nearby tree. Sparks flew, and the fire spread for a heartbeat before the rain smothered it. Then another bolt came, closer this time, slamming into the ground near the gate. The earth trembled, the air shivered, and the ropes around Nalia's wrists began to smolder. The storm, wild and unrestrained, seemed to aim its fury not at her, but at her chains. Each strike of lightning brought a burst of brilliance to the gate, its carvings glowing with ancient runes that no one alive could read. The villagers, peering through cracks in their doors, gasped in horror and awe. Some fell to their knees, believing the storm was the god's punishment. Others whispered Nalia's name like a prayer. Thunder rolled again, deep, booming, endless. The ropes snapped one by one, curling into ash that drifted away on the wind. Nalia, too weak to stand, collapsed against the cold iron. The moment her head touched it, a final flash illuminated the entire village. The gate, unmoved for generations, groaned like a living thing. The hinges screamed as the massive doors shuddered, then slowly, impossibly began to open on their own. Wind and light poured through the opening, swirling around Nalia in a golden spiral. Her body lifted from the ground, weightless, her torn garments fluttering like wings. The villagers cried out, shielding their eyes. Even Zara, watching from her window, stumbled back in fear. "It cannot be," she gasped, clutching the edge of the sill. The wind howled louder, wrapping around her words and flinging them back like scorn. In the heart of the storm, Nalia's figure was radiant, fragile and fierce, like a flame that refused to die. Her eyes fluttered open one last time, and she saw the gate fully open before her, the path beyond it glowing faintly, leading into the unknown. The wind encircled her like an embrace, lifting her higher. Her voice, soft but clear, drifted through the chaos. "Forgive them," she whispered. "The gate opens not for shame, but for truth." Then, with a sound like thunder sighing, the wind surged upward, carrying her into the storm. Her figure vanished in a burst of light that faded into rain. When morning came, the storm had passed. The sky was clean and blue, the air cool and still. The gate stood wide open, its hinges glowing faintly as if kissed by lightning. The villagers approached in silence, hearts pounding, but Nalia was gone. Only her ropes, turned to ash, lay at the threshold, and where her tears had once fallen, small white lilies now bloomed in the mud. From that day forward, no one called it the Gate of Shame again. It became known as the Gate of Return, for it had opened only once and only for her. The village awoke to whispers that clung to the air like mist. Nalia was gone. Those who dared approach the Gate of Shame found it standing wide open, its iron surface glimmering with a faint, golden light. No one had touched it. No one had dared. Yet it had opened, not to release guilt or punishment, but to announce something beyond their understanding. The villagers stood frozen, gazing at the sacred symbol that had once bound their shame and judgment, now transformed into a doorway that defied their cruelty. Fear spread quickly. Mothers pulled their children close. The elders muttered old prayers, voices trembling. The same people who had condemned Nalia now whispered her name with dread and regret. She was pure, some said. The gate opened for her truth. Others argued in panic. No, it's a curse, she was a spirit all along. But deep down, every soul in that village felt the same chill, the weight of guilt pressing heavy on their hearts. Zara tried to keep her composure. She ordered Tari to stay inside, claiming it was only a trick of light, a test from the gods. Yet at night, when the house grew silent and the moon poured silver light across the floor, Zara began to see things she couldn't explain. In the corners of her room, she would glimpse Nalia's outline, still, gentle, and shining faintly like morning dew. Sometimes she heard the sound of soft footsteps near the window, like someone walking barefoot through sand. Sleep abandoned her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nalia's gaze, calm and forgiving but endless, too deep for comfort. Those eyes weren't angry. They were something far worse, peaceful. Zara would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart racing, the faint scent of rain lingering around her bed. The more she tried to pray, the heavier her guilt grew, until even the name Nalia seemed to echo inside her chest. Then the land itself began to change. The crops that once thrived under Nalia's care wilted before harvest. The wells turned muddy and no amount of digging brought clear water. Livestock grew restless, refusing to eat. Even the birds avoided the fields, circling high above as if guarding something unseen. The temple bell, which only rang during ceremonies, began to toll at random, deep, hollow sounds that sent shivers through every home. Each time it rang, Zara felt the air grow colder, as though the earth itself mourned. The villagers gathered at the gate, bringing offerings of fruit, milk, and flowers to appease whatever spirit they believed had awakened. They laid them gently before the open gate, but the wind swept everything away, scattering petals, spilling milk, and snuffing candles in a single breath. No offering stayed. It was as if the gate refused their apologies. Tari, once bold and mocking, became withdrawn. She stopped speaking, stopped eating. One evening, Zara found her sitting by the door, staring blankly at the horizon. "Mother," she whispered, "I saw her." Zara's blood ran cold. "Who?" she demanded, though she already knew. Tari's lips trembled. "Nalia. She stood by the river. She smiled at me and said, 'The gate remembers who was kind.'" Zara slapped her daughter in panic, screaming that it was just a dream, but inside, her soul began to crack. The next morning, the same river overflowed, flooding the paths that led to the gate. Still, the gate itself remained untouched, dry and gleaming under the sun as though nothing could taint it. The elders met in fear. They spoke of closing the gate forever, sealing it with stone so no spirit could pass. But when the masons arrived with tools, their hammers shattered on the first strike. The metal refused to be scarred. The sound of breaking iron echoed through the valley, and every heart knew, some forces could not be silenced by human hands. Nights became longer. The moonlight grew colder. Zara's dreams deepened into torment. She saw herself bound to the gate, whispering for mercy that never came. She saw Nalia standing on the other side, radiant, unbound, watching her with sorrow. One night, when Zara awoke again to that familiar gaze, she fell to her knees and cried into her hands, "I was wrong. I was jealous. I destroyed what was pure." The wind outside seemed to sigh in reply, and for a brief moment the gate creaked gently, not in anger but in mourning. From that day on, Zara refused to leave her house. Her hair turned white within weeks. Tari disappeared soon after, vanishing into the forest, chasing the voice she claimed called her name. The villagers said she went searching for forgiveness, or perhaps for Nalia. As seasons changed, grass began to grow where Nalia's tears had once fallen. The soil turned rich again, flowers blooming around the base of the gate. The bells stopped ringing, the winds grew calm, and dawn returned to the land. But no one ever dared close the gate. It stood forever open, a silent monument to purity, pain, and grace. And when travelers asked the villagers why the gate never shut, they would answer quietly, eyes lowered. It waits for the one it opened for. Years had passed since the night the gate of shame had opened on its own. Time had dulled the memory for some, but for others, especially the old, it remained a wound that never truly healed. The village had changed, children had grown, the fields had been replanted, and new homes stood where the flood once swept through. Yet the gate still loomed at the border, untouched and open, its iron edges now draped in vines. It had become both a warning and a prayer, a reminder that mercy, once betrayed, never fully leaves the earth. But then came the drought. The sun burned hotter than anyone could remember. Rivers that once sang softly over stones turned to silence. The fields cracked open like broken pottery, and the wells, one by one, dried to dust. The elders led processions to the temple, offering incense and song to the spirits. The young carried jars of grain to the gate, laying them down with trembling hands. But the sky remained cloudless, cruel in its brightness. Zara was gone, her name whispered only in sorrow, her story spoken as a warning to those who let envy rule their hearts. Tari, her daughter, had never returned. Some said she had wandered beyond the hills in search of her stepsister's spirit. Others said the gate had claimed her too. On the 7th day of fasting, as the villagers gathered near the gate to pray for rain, a faint breeze began to stir. It was the first wind they had felt in months, cool, carrying with it a scent of wet earth. The people lifted their faces to the sky, hearts racing with hope. Then the sound came, a deep, echoing creak from the gate's hinges. Slowly, as though waking from an ancient slumber, the iron doors began to move. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The villagers fell silent, their prayers dying on their lips. The gate opened wider, and a light unlike sunlight spilled through, soft, golden, and warm. Out of that glow stepped a figure. Barefoot, draped in flowing garments that shimmered like the edge of dawn, Nalia appeared. Her hair glowed faintly as though kissed by moonlight, and her eyes, calm, knowing, eternal, met the faces of those who had once condemned her. The years had not aged her. She looked as she did the night she vanished, yet more radiant, more real than any dream. The villagers fell to their knees, many weeping openly. Even the elders, once proud in judgment, pressed their foreheads to the ground. Some whispered her name in disbelief, others in repentance. The wind swirled gently through the fields, and for the first time in years the air smelled alive. Nalia's gaze swept over the crowd, not with anger but with quiet sorrow. "Why do you fear me?" she asked, her voice soft, carrying like music through the stillness. "Did I not forgive you before the dawn rose?" No one dared answer. Tears glistened on their cheeks as they bowed deeper, trembling in awe and guilt. Nalia turned toward the barren fields. She knelt, touching the cracked earth with her palm. A faint shimmer spread from her hand, rippling like water. The ground darkened, and within moments green shoots began to rise, tender, alive, defying the sun's cruelty. Gasps turned to cries of wonder as the miracle spread. The scent of rain filled the air again, rich and clean. Then came thunder, not loud or violent but gentle, like the heartbeat of the world returning. A light drizzle began to fall, soaking the villagers who lifted their hands to the sky in joy. Children laughed, the elders wept, and every soul knew that the heavens had answered, through her. Nalia stood, her face calm beneath the soft rain. "Let the gate never be used for shame again," she said, her voice steady, resonant. "Let it stand for truth, for compassion, for those who hold light even when the world turns away." The wind rose once more, swirling around her. The vines on the gate bloomed suddenly, white flowers unfurling in seconds, their petals glowing in the rain. And as the villagers watched, Nalia stepped backward toward the open gate. I was never gone, she whispered. I only waited for hearts to learn their weight. The golden light brightened, wrapping around her like morning mist. Then, as quietly as she had appeared, she vanished into the glow. The gate closed with a soft sigh, sealing the light within. When the rain ended, the land was reborn. Crops flourished, rivers sang again, and the gate, once of iron and shame, now shimmered faintly with warmth. From that day onward, they called it the Gate of Mercy, and no one forgot the girl who returned with the wind. The air was still when Nalia appeared before Zara and Tari. The earth beneath them seemed to hum with quiet power, and the great iron gate loomed tall behind them, its surface glowing faintly in the dim light of dusk. The villagers gathered at a distance, watching in breathless silence. No one dared to move or speak. Even the wind, which had carried whispers through the land since Nalia's return, seemed to pause, waiting for judgment to begin. Zara stood trembling, her face pale and drawn, the years of guilt carved deep into her features. Tari clung to her mother's arm, her eyes wide with fear. They had thought this day would never come. They had prayed that the past would remain buried, that the gate would never open again to reveal the one they wronged. But now Nalia stood before them, radiant, calm, and unbroken, her presence more commanding than any queen's. When she spoke, her voice was neither loud nor harsh, yet it carried through the still air with unshakable clarity. Do you know why the gate opened for me? Zara's lips trembled, but no sound came. Tari dropped her gaze, unable to meet Nalia's eyes. It did not open for power, Nalia continued softly, nor for vengeance. It opened because I forgave you, even as you tied me to it in shame. The gate listens to truth, not lies. It moves for hearts that bear the weight of their deeds and still choose humility. As she spoke, the iron gate shuddered and closed behind them with a deep, echoing groan. The sound rippled through the air, heavy and final. The crowd gasped as the gate sealed completely, leaving only Nalia, Zara, and Tari within its shadowed circle. Zara sank to her knees, clutching at the dry earth. I thought I was protecting our home, she whispered hoarsely. They said you brought bad luck, that the gate obeyed dark magic. Her voice cracked. I was afraid, Nalia. Afraid of losing everything. Nalia stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Fear does not excuse cruelty, she said gently. You tied me to the gate not because of belief but because you wanted to see me broken. Yet even then the gate did not open for your lies, it waited for truth. Zara began to weep, her tears falling onto the earth that once drank Nalia's own. Tari tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. I followed her, she confessed in a trembling whisper. I mocked you because I was weak, because I wanted to be loved. Nalia's gaze softened. Then you understand, she said. The gate binds not just the body but the heart. It mirrors what we are within. That is why it closed today, to show you what it feels like to face the truth without escape. The iron glowed brighter as if responding to her words. A faint warmth filled the air, washing over the three of them. Zara raised her face, tears streaking through the dust. What will become of us? She asked, her voice small and trembling. Nalia looked toward the sky, where the last light of sunset turned the clouds to gold. That depends on what you carry in your hearts, she said. If guilt consumes you, the gate will never open. But if you face your shame and release it, it will know, and it will forgive. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft rustling of vines climbing the iron bars. Then slowly Zara rose to her feet. Her hands trembled, but her eyes, for the first time, held truth. I wronged you, child, she whispered. And I wronged myself. If forgiveness will open the way, then I beg it, not from the gate, but from you. Nalia's expression gentled. She reached forward, placing her hand over Zara's. You already have it, she said. The gate groaned once more, but this time the sound was lighter, like a sigh of release. The iron doors creaked open, letting in a warm gust of wind that brushed their faces. The glow softened into gold as the light spilled outward, carrying with it the weight of years unspoken. Zara and Tari stepped back, tears in their eyes, as Nalia turned toward the villagers. Let the gate never again be used for shame, she declared. Let it stand as a reminder that truth frees and forgiveness restores. And as the gate stood wide behind her, flowers began to bloom where her tears had once fallen, marking the place where judgment had become mercy.